Felix Milton, welcome to the building.
Good morning.
Good morning. So, it's our monthly get together. We are talking about various different things, and today you're going to be focusing on pensions.
Exactly. I think they're an important subject that everyone should know about and have one probably. So let's delve right into it and find out what they are.
Okay, so why should we have a pension? There's a good question to start off with.
So perhaps I should go back to basics and say what a pension is. So a pension is simply a savings vehicle that you use for your retirement. So they're quite straightforward. The main advantage of a pension is that any money you put in, the government adds to it too, and it will help to build up a pot that you can't access over your working life, and then it's there for you when you get to your retirement. So that's probably why you should have a pension, because you benefit from government money going into it as well as your own, and it provides money that you can't access, safe, ready for your retirement.
Now, there's a big question I've got like hitting around my head at the moment. A lot of people go, why do I need to have a pension? Because it's a national pension. Do you think that's still going to be there in 20 years' time?
Well, I mean, it does depend on how old you are, but the state pension alone is only about £8,500 per year. So if you think about what you're earning now and what you're living on now, it's likely that in the majority of cases, it's more than the state pension alone. So it's important to save separately to just the state pension, as it probably won't be enough in retirement to meet your living needs.
But there's rumours going around it probably won't even exist in about 20 years' time.
Well, it is the single biggest benefit the government pays out. So it is classed as a benefit, even though it's contributory. But it is one of the things that the government in the future may look to cut, because it does cost them, I think, off the top of my head, around £120 billion a year.
Wow, that's a lot of money.
It is, yes.
So really don't just rely on that, because as you're saying, with the cost of living and everything else, that money doesn't go that far.
Not at all, no.
Not if you think that, like the BBC are talking about, you're over 75, you're going to have to start paying for your TV licence. That's one. How much do you save on council tax? You don't. You still got to pay that. You still got to feed yourself. There's electric, there's the gas. That £8,000 is going to go nowhere, so you need to make sure you've got a pension.
Exactly, and your provision is as good as anyone else's, so it makes sense to save for yourself.
Okay, so you're in work at the moment, and your employer says, "Do you want to join our pension?" Is that a good thing to do?
In nearly every case, yes, because the prime advantage of joining your workplace pension scheme is that when you add to it, your employer adds to it too. So you benefit from basically a pay rise, if you like. Not that you can access it immediately, but you are getting their contributions. Whereas if you're not in the scheme, they won't be paying you that additional money anywhere. So it does make sense to join the employer's scheme more often than not.
Does the employer actually, if you don't join that, does the employer actually have to put that money somewhere else?
They don't. No, they're not obliged to. But under the auto-enrolment rules, they have to automatically put you into the pension scheme. And for the majority, it means good, because they should stay there. But you can choose to opt out, and you shouldn't do that.
Right. And that is for people who's employed, not self-employed.
Yes, that's for people who are employed only. And yes, generally you shouldn't opt out once you're in, because they're very attractive benefits, unless you know of a specific situation yourself, which means that you've been told you shouldn't join, or there are a few nuanced pieces there.
Now, what about if you don't think you can afford a pension? Should you prioritise the spending over another way of doing things?
Well, I mean, it does depend on your personal circumstances, but if you think you can't afford the pension contributions and you're spending all of your money at the end of the month, for example, just remember that if you're not in it, you're not benefiting from that employer uplift. So I know it's very difficult and sounds very hard to do, because you are putting some of your paycheck each month into a pension. You're not going to be benefiting from that employer uplift. So that's why it's very important to consider a pension. And regardless, if you're saving for your retirement now, you can lock it away, worry about it later, and know that you have built up at least some savings.
Yeah, I must admit, actually, when you start putting things away like that, to start off with, I could have done with that. But then it becomes a habit and you don't miss it.
Exactly, and it becomes, if you view it as, say, an expense that you have to meet or a necessary bill, but knowing that it's full well a savings account, then perhaps that's a better way of viewing it.
But when the money's locked in there, you can't get it, can you?
You can't get it until you're over 55 or in ill health, effectively. But basically, for the majority of people over the age of 55, and that's actually going to rise, so it's in line with 10 years before state pension age. So that's an important thing to bear in mind as well, that it will gradually go up with state pension age when you can access your private pension as well.
What's the forecast on that at the moment? Because 66, isn't it, at the moment?
Well, 67 it will be shortly. So the access age for a private pension will be 57, but it will probably rise. And for someone of my age now, with long-term mortality rates increasing, I'm not expecting to get a state pension until I'm probably 80, or if at all. So that's me looking at it maybe from a rather pessimistic angle, but that would mean that I couldn't access a private pension from, say, 70 based on the legislation.
Okay. Who can join a pension?
Nearly anyone can join a pension under the age of 75, actually. So even a child can have a pension scheme. You're limited in terms of how much you can put into a pension by 100% of earnings, or 2,880 net, or 3,600 gross. And again, 100% of earnings is limited to 40,000. So it does depend, but generally anyone can have a pension if you're under the age of 75, and you can put money in, and the government will add tax relief to that as well. So they're very attractive.
So a little one goes off to nursery school. Would you like to join our pension? Would that
Well,
really
they won't get offered a pension like that. But say a grandparent wants to give their grandchild some money and lock it away for the longer term, knowing that they can't access it, not even at 18, but until their retirement. It's a very good way of giving money to your grandchildren and showing them about investing from a young age, and knowing that that money will be there for them in retirement. And of course, they've got such a long time frame. If they're, say, under the age of 10, they've got at least 50 years that money's got to be invested for, really, until they can access it. So a little bit can go a long way when you allow for compounding growth and so on.
A lot of people, actually, they go, look, I need to put something aside for my children for when I pass away, and their children, my grandchildren. And then sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. So really, if they had put the money invested into a pension, it would already be there. And
Well,
there wouldn't be any problems at the end.
No, and a grandparent could only have to put in £2,880 to a child's pension, and the government will add £720 on top of that for nothing. So you're getting money from the government for your grandchild as well. So they're a very good savings vehicle for your grandchildren if you are wanting to put away money for the longer term for them.
I'm thinking, actually, how many grandchildren have I got? I might go and do that, actually. I might talk to you about that shortly. Wow, that's one way of doing it, isn't it? So what are the limits? What is the maximum limits you can put into a pension?
So as I touched upon earlier, there's the limit of £40,000 if you earn more than that. So 100% of earnings subject to a cap of 40,000, or if you're not earning at all, £3,600 gross. So that means you can put in £2,880 net, and the government adds £720. So they're the limits. However, there's a big issue you may have seen in the media at the moment from the NHS and the pensions there, when that if you earn over £150,000 a year, as most senior consultants do, they actually lose how much that can go into their pension. So it gets tapered down to a lower level of 10,000, and it actually means that it can be costly if you're overfunding your pension. So that's part of the issue at the moment, with politicians arguing about removing this taper for NHS workers.
Is there still the thing called the gold edge pensions? Where there was certain parts of employment where that pension was that good that when you actually retired, you virtually was on the same money.
There are still a few around that are there for further accumulation for existing members. The majority of them now are closed to anyone else to join because they are extremely costly for employers to provide. In the public sector, they still have some of the most generous pension schemes because they operate in a very similar manner to that, but they won't be as generous as some of the ones of yesteryear, which have been closed for good reason, really, because they were far too expensive for employers.
Right. We've touched on having pensions for children. And I must admit, actually, it's a great idea. You've actually opened up an idea for me what I can do for my grandchildren. If anybody's got a question, okay, if you've got a question for Felix, the phone line's open at the moment, 01271 323 010, and we'll talk again in a moment. So Ian was on the phone talking with you.
He was, yes. And he wanted to know a bit around the, rather morbidly, he didn't mean it in this way, what would happen if your grandchild died? Would that money just disappear? And I had to assure him that no, it wouldn't. It would go to the nominated beneficiaries on it. So if they were still a child, probably the parents or maybe their siblings. So that money is still there. It's not lost if the grandchild were to die before they accessed it.
That is one of those sort of questions which actually does go around people's mind. What happens to the money? If you've got a sizable pot that's been invested, what happens to that when you pass away? Does it then all come to whoever it's been left to? Or does the taxman take a big chunk of it? Or does it just disappear?
Exactly, and it's an important consideration when establishing anything like this. You find out about it, because whilst none of us want to think about it, we need to bear in mind that it will happen at some point, and you need to be careful as working out where it does go.
It's like I was taught years and years ago, insurance is something what might happen, assurance is going to happen.
Exactly, yes.
And that is the difference. So what would happen to that money then? So say you got round figures, £100,000 in a pension pot, and then you pass away. Does that £100,000 then go into the estate of that person to be shared accordingly?
No,
Or-
so money within a pension is treated differently to the estate. So what you do on a pension is you nominate death beneficiaries. So say you had a pot of £100,000. If you die under the age of 75, your beneficiaries can inherit that £100,000 tax-free. If you die over the age of 75, they can inherit that money, albeit it stays as a pension, and any money they draw from it is taxable as income in the year they take it. So they can tailor the withdrawals to reduce their tax bill, but effectively they inherit it as a taxable income stream from that point. So the money isn't lost. It does go to where you want it to go, but it's important that you have nominated on your death who you would like to receive your pension. As you've said, it's a certain event that you will die eventually, and you need to bear in mind that that money is treated separately to your will and estate. But if you haven't nominated, the trustees of the scheme will usually look at what your will says and make a judgment based on that, reflecting your wishes at the time. So say you haven't nominated any beneficiaries, whilst you should do it, if the will says, yes, split my estate equally between my children, the trustees would look at that and go, okay, that's clearly what they wanted to do, and probably split it that way too.
Okay, hands up then who wants to give 100% without tax and die at 75. How many would like to go past that age? Yes, everybody puts their hands up. Ideal. So what happens to the pension? You're paying into it. How does it get divided up? Where does it go to? Who are like the people like yourself? Where is the chosen areas of where they're going to invest that money?
So pensions are just a wrapper that holds the money, and you can actually self-direct within that wrapper if you wish where it's invested. So you can seek advice or get an investment manager to do it for you, and they can invest that money over the longer term in a wide range of stocks and shares, and even things like commercial property, for example. Not that that's recommended for the majority, but for everyone, really, it will be in stocks and shares, and it will be invested over the longer term. And as history has proven, stocks and shares outperform generally every other asset class over the longer term. So that's where your pension will be invested, so that when you get to the age of retirement, you can have a meaningful sum there to meet your living needs.
Underline, isn't it? Like, where it's going to be, and the fact that it can be moved around. And the other thing is drawdown, things like that. You can take 25% on retirement, tax-free, but after that you pay tax.
After that, it's classed as income in the year of extraction. So it's important you realise how much you're drawing. If you get to the age of 55, which is currently the age of access, and decide that you want all of it, you can take 25% tax-free, as you've noted. But if you want to take the rest of it, and your pension pot is, say, 200,000, you can only take it after that quarter is gone. The 75%, if you took it all as a lump sum, you push yourself into an additional rate tax bracket. So you'd be paying tax probably at a much higher rate. Whereas if you staggered the withdrawals over a few years, you can reduce the level of tax you pay on those withdrawals. And it's important to bear that in mind. And lots of people have actually been encashing their pensions just to hold them in cash, which doesn't make any sense at all, because the pension can be in cash itself if you really wanted that, not that that's recommended. And if you're taking it all out and paying a big tax bill, you're losing all that money unnecessarily to the tax man.
So 25% per year?
No, in total. So of the pot. So you can
Right.
take 25% of the total pot if you crystallise the whole thing.
Right.
And that's all you can have then tax-free, and the rest is classed as taxable income.
So you could do that in year one, take 25%.
You could, and then leave the rest for as long as you want.
You can take the 25% over 10 years. You can't take 25% 1 year, 3 years later take another lump sum.
You couldn't
tax-free.
take the 25% over 10 years in the way I think you're thinking about it. You'd have to crystallise a small portion of the pension each year. So your pension is known as an uncrystallised pot, which sounds quite complicated, and we're getting quite technical here. You'd split it down into lots of little segments. So you'd crystallise a bit and take 25% of that bit, and the rest would be classed as the income pot. And then you take another bit each year and crystallise that until the whole thing's gone, and that's how you split the 25% down over a few years effectively.
I'm a little bit more sort of opened to what this is all about, and I'm sure that people listening are going, right, I think I got the idea of that. It's quite a complicated thing, but that's why you need somebody like yourself who understands the ins and outs of this maze. Go and get yourself an independent financial advisor if you're thinking about this, because you can do it on your own, but I think you might get lost in the maze somewhere.
And that's why we're here to help guide through it.
Felix Milton, thank you very much indeed for coming in. We'll see you another time.
Thank you very much.